they stationed themselves under the hospitals. And many of the doctors and many of the survivors and many of the hostages were brought into those hospitals. So many of the doctors are part of the Hamas. When we hear the figures of how many people have died, it's from Hamas. So to understand how they have to fight this war, that's on their border, that's next door. Yeah, that's next door. And the video I've just watched, which I think everyone should have to watch that video. Anyone waving a pro-Palestinian flag, anyone on a demonstration in London, any politician supporting them, anyone that was calling for a ceasefire should have had to watch that video of what this community and what this country and their people had to go through.
Is the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas going to last? Well, time will tell. But check out this clip over here with Tommy Robinson actually seeing some of the October 7th footage firsthand and seeing some of the new footage that's been discovered about the whole tunnel system in Gaza. Listen to his reaction. He completely breaks down crying after seeing it. And he tells why he's interested in seeing it and why everyone else should see it as well. So we'll watch this clip together and then talk about it. But first, hit that subscribe button over there in the corner. We'd love to stay in touch. Check this out.
You don't hate them enough. We don't hate them enough. I don't think that anyone understands what the mindset is of Hamas, who Hamas are. So remember, we always see on the news, and all the accusations are that Israel's bombing hospitals or bombing schools. Hamas, the video I've just watched of Hamas butchering their way through and massacring innocent civilians and the joy they're getting whilst doing it, those same Hamas fighters are stationed under the hospital. Yeah. So when Israel goes to war to get their people back or to fight this evil jihadi group, then they station themselves under the hospitals. And many of the doctors and many of the survivors and many of the hostages were brought into those hospitals. So many of the doctors are part of the Hamas. When we hear the figures of how many people have died, it's from Hamas. So to understand how they have to fight this war, that's on their border, that's next door. Yeah, that's next door. And the video I've just watched, which I think everyone should have to watch that video. Anyone waving a pro-Palestinian flag, anyone on a demonstration in London, any politician supporting them, anyone that was calling for a ceasefire should have had to watch that video of what this community and what this country and their people had to go through and actually witness what they went through. Yeah, and everyone should have had to seen that. And the sickest thing is the joy in the people doing it, the joy in celebration and the calls to Allah whilst they're doing every single second of it. So yeah, and now I'm going to see the tunnels, because the tunnels is a big problem. It's a massive problem because you're not fighting an army that put on a uniform. Yeah, that's not who Israel are fighting. They're fighting a guerrilla warfare army who base themselves inside civilians, inside schools, underground, and that's how they behave. Yeah. So how do you fight them? How do you fight them? And we hear so much. You hear all the accusations of genocide and genocide. More people are killed in Yemen. No one wants to talk about it. No one wants to talk about it. So how many people have been killed in Nigeria now in jihad? This is the same enemy. It's the same enemy that's done this to Israel. It's the same enemy that's doing it in Nigeria. It's the same enemy across the world. Yeah. How do they fight that war? So this is a major point. The tunnels are a major point. So there's an army underground in tunnels under a civilian population. How do you fight them? I just watched the civilians were put into trucks. So you know that those civilians were put into trucks. And you know that some of them have just been released this week. Many of them didn't make it. Many of them were murdered. But 700 days they would have spent. Imagine the fear that would have been in them. Because those people didn't know if their families, their friends were killed. They didn't know what happened back home. They were whisked off the street, taken away, watched people murdered in front of them. And they were brought into underground tunnels like this. And the key point being that this tunnel is underneath a hospital. This jihadist tunnel.
What is it you're seeing?
You're just seeing a real small, very close-knit tunnel as they're walking through. They're finding their way through the tunnels. It's very dark. It's very dark. These are massive tunnels. There's kitchen sinks there, so they've got it's an entire underground network of tunnels. And I guess this is the first time the Israeli military have got access to understand what's happening. And this is the sort of tunnels, this is the reason why they couldn't find many of the hostages, because they're in underground networks like this. It's a walkthrough, yeah, you're seeing the soldiers walk with the cameras. They're getting to the end now, look, and there's just so many different directions. Where's this going up into a little hole? And then now there's a little set of stairs in the tunnel underground. There's water running down, so there's water leaking, but there's like a makeshift staircase where they're now going up the levels. Look, and now it's lit up. Look at the scale of these tunnels. They're like a little rat's nest full of little Hamas rats. And now this tunnel's coming up into, where is this? We've come out of the tunnel, that's into probably the hospital. Wow. It's just so it shows you the sheer scale and the size of the underground networks. And what people need to realise is when you're seeing a hospital was bombed, Hamas's headquarters is underneath the bloody hospital. How are you going to take them out? Their headquarters is underneath the hospital. They purposely put their weapons and fire their rockets from schools. They purposely do it. But they're willing to sacrifice the school and the kids and the hospital. They don't care. They actually want those targets to be hit. So then their activists or their propaganda units from Iran and Qatar, all over, not even Iran and Qatar, the BBC, act as the propaganda wing for them by pumping the stories across the world. Hospital has been hit. Why don't you say that Hamas is underneath the hospital, or Hamas's headquarters is in the hospital, or Hamas's doctors, and when they took some of the hostages from Israel, they were in those same hospitals. But yeah, I think you're just seeing the sheer scale, and you have to understand how does Israel fight that enemy? How do you fight that enemy? And reverse the roles. I always like to reverse the roles and think of Scotland. Scotland elect a government. They're on our border. They elect a government that says the final day of judgment does not come until every English person is dead. They then continually fire rockets into England. What would we be saying? Then the government's army come across the border, massacre in the video that I've just watched, rape, massacre children, kidnap children, bring them back, and then they base themselves underneath the main hospital in Glasgow. What are you going to do? You're going to blow up the hospital in Glasgow. You're going to go for them, yeah? If you watch that video, I don't think there should be a ceasefire after watching that video. I know you've got their people back, but sod the ceasefire. Every single one of them jihadists needs going when you watch that video and the celebration of it. But yeah, I just think that people need to understand the war that's happening and understand how do they fight that war? How are they meant to fight that war? And then understand the casualties that have come from the Israeli army from going in trying to rescue their people. And then understand that whilst all that's going on, the British state just recognised the state of Palestine. They just rewarded. What did those men going in who were screaming Allah Akbar, who were cutting people's heads off want? They want the state of Palestine. You've just rewarded the jihadists with a state who still have a pay-to-slay policy funded by our taxpayers' money in Britain. It's an insult. It's an insult to every person you saw murdered in that video that I just watched. It's an insult. We only saw 10% of the murders, 10% of the bodies in the video you just watched, 10%. So there's 90% you're not seeing. But yeah, I just think I think that people need to understand how Hamas fight and that they're willing to fight, and they actually purposely fight like this. They purposely actually want the hospital's target. They want it all. So yeah. Because what we saw, you see two young boys, children, little children, their father is killed in front of them. They're then crying, they're hurt from shrapnel, they're crying their eyes out, they're on their floor wishing they were dead. And then you see, yeah. You don't hate them enough. We don't hate them enough. I don't think that anyone understands what the mindset is of Hamas, who Hamas are. And that must, it's an incredibly frustrating thing if you watch that and you understand that they're celebrated in our capital city. And whilst they're celebrated, the police didn't enforce any law against them celebrating. Prescribed terrorist organisations were continually celebrated every single Saturday for a year after that. The next week, in fact, in the first 48 hours, they were out marching in celebration across the West. And you have to see those two young boys, their dad's killed in front of them. The mum then turns up, she's trying to get them. And then it's horrible, man. They go into the kitchen, yeah, they're hurt, and the jihad is just standing there, sipping Coke, sipping a bottle of Coke. The kid's on the floor, and then the little boy's trying to help the other boy. The other boy's lost his eyesight in one eye, and their little brother's trying to help, the big brother's trying to help him. Yeah. I just don't think that when you hear, when we hear or you see the news or you see the media, you see the portrayal given. You need to watch those videos, and you need to understand what the people living here in these civilian areas face, because the people just over that fence in the neighbourhood next door, which is what you can see how close it is. There's no big fortified separation. There's just a little fence, and there's a mile. Yeah, and then you understand how those people think. You know the Blackland Theatre, you know Nice, you know the Manchester Arena bombing, you know all the attacks on Westminster Bridge. Do you know all the Al Qaeda attacks? All of these are the same mindset, but there's an entire army, an army We've got handfuls of these successful terror attacks. There's an army, or there was an army. Thankfully, many of them have been killed. But there was an entire army stationed on that border, on that border, on that border, that wished to come into this country and rape and pillage their way through if they were successful. And they were successful on October 7th. But yeah, I think everyone should have to watch that film.
I don't think that anyone summed it up as clearly as Prime Minister Netanyahu did a few weeks ago, when he said that giving the Palestinians a state right next to Israel after October 7th would be like giving Al-Qaeda a state right next to New York right after September 11th. It doesn't make any sense. It's not possible to live like that. And what Tommy Robinson is saying over here is that no country would live like that. He said it's if Scotland were to elect a government that said that they're not going to achieve their fulfillment in this world until every Englishman is dead, and they sent their elected government sent in people to England to start raping, killing, destroying as many innocents as possible on a given day. Rest assured that England would bomb anything in its path in order to get its hostages back and to stop that from continuing further. This is exactly what Israel has been doing. Israel is the only democracy in that area of the world. It is the only country that has any semblance of government that resembles the West. It is a country that does not want has no expansionist ambitions, does not want to be Israel to expand its borders to the entire Middle East. It just wants its citizens to be able to live in peace. And in that regard, I'm glad that Tommy Robinson watched the footage and is informing others that they should watch the footage of what started all of this to begin with. And more people do need to watch to understand exactly why Israel did what it did and is doing what it's doing, and why, and to recognize that every nation worth its salt would do exactly the same thing, probably without the same precision that Israel has been operating with. The numbers have just come out and they're staggeringly low as far as urban combat numbers would be. Israel has been as precise as humanly possible. It's something that all the armies of the world can learn from. And it's something that we all in the West have to be aware of, that radical Islam wants to destroy the West. It's not only Israel. This is not an Israeli problem. This is not a European problem. This is a world problem. The Western civilization is at risk from radical Islamic terror. Again, that is not a call out on all Arabs, on all Muslims, not at all by any stretch of the imagination, but this faction, which is a fairly large faction, percentage-wise, when you have a group that's over 1 billion people, even a small minority, even a 10% minority, is still 100 million people. Well, if you have over 1 billion, you have 2 billion. So what's 10% of that? What's 20% of that? We're still talking about hundreds of millions of people that are somewhat in line with this radical ideology. Unless we can come to terms with that and what that means, and that is an ideology that needs to be defeated, unfortunately, the entire Western world is under threat of potential attacks just like it. God forbid it should continue. We need to be well aware of what's out there, though, in order to know what we're up against. If you like this content overall, hit that subscribe button over there in the corner. We'd love to stay in touch. Take care.